Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'll be doing a review of Mark Twain's The Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. I just finished reading it the other day, so I thought I'd share some thoughts I had about the book. Yeah, so I have this nice Library of American edition. I think I've said it before, probably the highest quality books that collect American literature on the market. This particular collection has The Prince and the Pauper, obviously Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court, as well as the personal recollection of Joan of Arc. I'll just be talking about the middle one there, obviously. Yeah. So what is the basic premise of a Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court? I feel like that just got to be like a acronym or something. CYAC maybe. Whatever. We'll just say Connecticut Yankee going forward. The premise is that there's this engineer in 19th century America from Connecticut named Hank Morgan, and he ends up getting into a fight and gets hit upon the head really hard, gets knocked out, and somehow wakes up 1300 years in the past in medieval Britain. So that's the basic premise of the book. Like I said, this was written by Mark Twain, and a famous American author. You know, wrote Tom Sawyer, Huckleberry Finn. Known to be quite a comedic author. Yeah, he wrote this sort of as a sort of satire against what he perceived to be an over-romanticization of chivalry, particularly from other authors. His main source was Thomas Malory's Le Morte d'Arthur. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's, he incorporates, the mythical King Arthur and Guinevere and Sir Lancelot and Camelot, the Knights of the Round Table. All of that sort of stuff he pulls from Thomas Malory's book. Yeah. So, to get into it, I think I'll title this like the American Don Quixote. It's not a complete one-to-one. They're not identical. They're just kind of similar in the sense that it's, I don't know, I guess a sort of sauntering tale. It doesn't really have like an overarching plot. It's kind of episodic, sort of like Don Quixote. So we have Hank Morgan, the Yankee who wakes up 1300 years in the past. He's obviously very confused. He gets brought to King Arthur's court, and he has to he's a pretty clever lad. So he basically knows that there's an eclipse coming, and so he uses that to convince everyone that he's a magician. And they're very superstitious people, these Proto-Britons. Yeah, so that's like the basic setup. And then from there, he's basically like trying to reconstitute modern society, or, 1800s modern society in Great Britain, in the Middle Ages. So that's basically what he's trying to do. And it's, like I said, Mark Twain's a humorist. It's pretty funny. The main character, Hank Morgan, is pretty much like the personification of the vocab word sardonic. He kind of insults and bullies these medieval people without them even realizing it, and sometimes get frustrated with them. He hates the whole knighthood institution. It's just pretty funny. Because obviously he has trouble understanding them, and they have trouble understanding him. And they're very gullible. He also has this rivalry with Merlin, who's sort of the King Arthur's court magician. but who's pretty much an old fraudster throughout the entire book, obviously, until the end where it's actually a little ambiguous, excuse me. But yeah, it's pretty funny. He keeps like absolutely like one-upping and like destroying Merlin. He's like, well, I'm not going to spoil the entire book, but yeah, it's pretty funny. So like, what are some of the adventures that the character goes on? Well, he tries to make a name for himself, and so he has to go on this quest to rescue a whole bunch of princesses from ogres, which he obviously knows is not real. So he thinks it's a big waste of time, but it's necessary for him to sort of build some prestige for a duel that he has in a few years, once his opponent gets back from looking for the Holy Grail. And so he like huffs and puffs along, dresses up in the traditional knight regalia, absolutely complains the entire time. He gets like a fly caught in his visor and it won't get out. And he's like, I have an itch, but I can't scratch it, obviously, because I'm in this metal tin and I'm burning up in the sun. He's always very short-tempered. And obviously the ogres turn out to be like pigs. But the person, his guide, is so convinced that they're real that he just like goes along with it just to assuage her. Another episode later on, he wants to like LARP or like dress up like a peasant to sort of see what they're like. Hopefully they'll be more candid with him if they think that he's one of them. And then King Arthur decides, he's like, that's a great idea. And like he wants to go along. And it's ridiculous. Yeah, there's a pretty funny sequence where he's trying to talk to like these peasant folk about their wages and stuff like that. And they're like bragging. They're like, well, in our realm over here, we have like twice the wage that you have in Camelot. And he's like, but how much can you buy with it? It seems that you can buy less than double that what we can buy with our wages in Camelot. And they're like, but we have higher wages, though, you admit it. And Hank Morgan's like, yes, I'm not denying it, but I'm saying that it purchases less than in Camelot, even though you have a higher wage, like nominally. It's not actually. And they're like, but it's a higher wage, though. Like, this is the kind of, it just goes completely over their head. Stuff like that happens all the time. And he's like fuming. He's like losing his mind. He's like, oh my God. He's like, oh, these idiots. You can tell it's gotten awkward because they feel bad for me. They think that I've been bested, and they think I'm the one who doesn't understand. And they're like patronizing him. They're like, oh, it's okay. And he's absolutely fuming. Yeah. And he sets up like a whole bunch of, sets up like a shadow society in England. He has like modern military. He has like a West Point Academy, basically, modern schools. He starts manufacturing like weapons, modern weapons and stuff like that. Yes. And this all comes to a head by the end, but I won't like go too far into that. Like I said, I think Twain is his books are pretty much a light read. He does get into some pretty, he does go into some political commentary and social commentary. I'll talk a little bit about it, but it's a pretty light read. It's just fun entertainment, I guess, fantasy type thing. Yeah. If you're looking for a fun romp, a time travel romp, then this is probably this is a good one to check out. I checked out what other people were saying. I guess people don't really like it. I don't know. Maybe I'm just like out of touch or something. I really thought it was a pretty fun read. The only thing that was really tough was I feel like Mark Twain kind of leaned too far into like the medieval talk. like, what do I mean by this? Like, the medieval people have a really, really roundabout way of talking before they sort of incorporate Hank Morgan. Oh, by the way, his nickname's the Boss. Until they sort of like adopt the Boss's language. Yeah, I'm talking about like pretty long, meandering sentences that don't really say anything. And that's the point. It's supposed to be that way. Like Hank Morgan remarks upon it. He's like, "What do you guys? Can you guys like get to the point you're like literally not saying anything? You're like yapping, but not saying anything meaningful." Yeah, and it really annoys him because then when he interrupts them, they start all over. It's a really, really ridiculous way of speaking. I can't really convey it. You'll have to like see it for yourself, and you'll know instantly what I'm talking about. But I feel like Mark Twain leans a little bit too heavy on that. Like we get it. They're like incomprehensible. You don't have to like keep hitting that point home and going on for like pages at a time about them listing like knights or something, or recounting a jousting tournament. Like we got the point. Mark Twain also makes some interesting stylistic choices because Hank Morgan like sets up a newspaper. He like creates the first newspaper, and Mark Twain basically like photocopies like the columns from the newspaper into the book. That's odd. It's cool though. Yeah, I guess I don't really have much like critical commentary to say. Like I said, it's a pretty light read. I did have one note when it came to one point he had. I thought it could be a launchpad for an interesting discussion. Yeah, I'll probably read some of the passages and then sort of convey what I was thinking. Just one second. So the chapter I'll be talking about here is chapter 13, titled Freeman. The context of this, the main character, Hank Morgan, is often as sallies into the kingdom. He encounters some ostensible freemen who are basically in all but name slaves to their local lords, this being sort of feudalistic times. And he sort of questions them, tries to seriously get into their minds and figure out what their like opinion on government is. And he finds out that like popular sovereignty is not even like a thing that they've like ever considered, or that there could be another form of government outside of monarchy or nobility and aristocracy and all the rest. And he's really sad by this, that they've never even thought about it. And like I said, this is early on in the book. And so he decides from this point on that he's going to like foment a revolution, institute a republic and the monarchy. Right. So he falls into some musings here. So he wants to do a revolution, change the forms of government. So he says, "You see, my kind of loyalty was loyalty to one's country, not to its institutions or its office holders. The country is the real thing, the substantial thing, the eternal thing. It is the thing to watch over and care for and be loyal to. Institutions are extraneous. They are its mere clothing, and clothing can wear out, become ragged, cease to be comfortable, cease to protect the body from winter, disease, and death." Right. I think it's interesting that he would say that, especially as an American, which is why, right, I just think it's perhaps a little bit of an inconsistent type of thing, because at least today, right, it's really, how do I say this delicately? I feel like people like this type of rhetoric only when it conforms to their own political inclination. Right. So in the context of the main character saying it here, he's saying his loyalty is to the country and not to the monarchy. And that's kind of like based in epic. But if you were to apply that line of thinking today, it'd be kind of considered unpatriotic to say, I guess my main contention is I kind of wonder if in modern America, in popular consciousness, the institutions are the country, and undermining them would be to attack the country itself. Right. I don't know. Right. I mean, if like a political party or candidate tried to like circumvent the constitutional order on the grounds that they were loyal to the country and not its institutions, they would probably be arrested. People might argue back that the people chose this government, but like in the book, have like the people actually considered like challenging the power structures they were born into? I mean, probably not. The system, if you think it's great or not, was, I mean, you were born into it. It was kind of foisted upon you. And I'm not saying that's a good or bad thing. I'm just wondering if it's an interesting observation if we have the American here who distinguishes between the institutions and the country, and modern day where I'm surmising that most people think the institutions are the country, and that you can't be loyal to one without the other. I guess maybe he thinks monarchy is like an inherently unjust arrangement, and democracy is an inherently just one, which could be likely, I believe. I mean, yeah, Twain was a progressive writer for the time, obviously not talking about in the modern connotation. I mean, contra the Gilded Age, that is. But anyway, I just thought that was an interesting launching pad for discussion, perhaps. Yeah. Other observations also in this chapter. I don't know. He kind of goes, Mark Twain kind of goes, he rants against the established church a lot. I think he says that he would want like elective Protestantism is what he's like aiming for. He says he makes some strong statements. He says like an established church is an established crime. That elected government would last until it had an established church. He's very worried about sort of centralized religious dogma. Yeah, he wants to see it broken up into like 43 different sects, I believe is almost a quote of what he said about the church. And that kind of happened. And I guess this is like a broader, it's not even like a critique. I just like an observation about books like this and statements like that. Right, like I said, this was kind of a satire about perhaps an overzealousness about romanticizing the medieval age. But the punch of that is kind of lost because like no one's romanticizing that age today. And the punch about, a centralized church heralding the end of democracy or wanting to see it broken up into a whole bunch of different sects which fight each other and stuff like that. I mean, that's basically what happened. People still kind of like attack the church and stuff like that. Like it's still this uber powerful entity that it once was, but I feel like it's kind of beating a dead horse at this point. Yeah, I mean, Mark Twain, the Voltaires, they kind of won, undeniably. But people still kind of act like the opposite has happened. I don't know. And I kind of wonder too if this kind of was an inevitable outcome from the Enlightenment. Anyway, where was I going with this? Right, so like when he's talking about that sort of stuff, it just... I mean, I don't know. It's just kind of like, oh, okay. It's not exactly treading new ground, but it's such a big focus in the book that was novel at the time, but it's rhetoric that you still hear, but it's kind of like if you go to Reddit, if you're like r/atheism, like people are like talking about like the church and religiosity is like their number one issue or vantage point of like analyzing like politics and society, when it's like a dwindling institution that's like a shell of it once was. With almost no authority over anybody anymore. In the United States, that is. Almost inherently. Oh, but I better be careful. Right, I feel like people kind of go, basically find the sect of their church that conforms or affirms their point of view. In any case, Twain also makes some strong statements about the French Revolution. He's like, there was two reigns of terror. There was the one that people like whine about, and there was the real reign of terror, which was thousands of years of monarchy. I'm like, damn, bruh. I think he calls the French Revolution blessed. I don't know. Those are some strong statements. It has always been the case that, from a historical standpoint, the farther in time and geography you get away from such events like the Reign of Terror, the more and more willing people are willing to condone it. True, things be much more nuanced than they appear, but you don't want to go too far. All right, I feel like we're straying way too far off the topic of the book review. So would I recommend that you read A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court? I would, yeah. It's a fun read. Yeah. Go ahead and read it. Some people call it like the first, or among the first science fiction novels. I can't speak much to that. I don't think I'm well read in science fiction type stuff. But it's a fun story. It's pretty fun. It's funny. It's fun. It's a nice ride. All right, I guess that's all I have to say. It's probably not my best book review. If you like this content, please consider subscribing and leaving a comment. Right, yeah, thank you for watching. I hope you have a good one.